Welcome to the Grow and Go podcast, where we discuss feeding under fives in the early education setting. Your hosts today are Claire and myself, Stella. We're accredited practicing dietitians with a special interest in feeding kids under 5. This podcast is being recorded on the lands of the Yagara and Turrbal peoples. We pay our respects to traditional custodians and their elders past and present. So today we'll be talking about introducing solids, when to start, what to provide, and strategies to ensure a healthy start. I think it might be helpful to give a bit of an outline for what we should be expecting at each age range when we're introducing solids. So would you mind giving us a bit of an overview of what we should be introducing at what stage of learning?
Now, most babies start to show signs of being ready to start solids around 6 months old. There's some variability in that, but the recommendation is not to commence earlier than 4.5 months. Around 6 months, babies are starting to run out of their iron stores that they've built up whilst they were inside mum. Now, breast milk contains a little bit of iron, and although the iron it does contain is really well absorbed, it's not enough for a growing baby, and so we need to start introducing iron from iron-rich foods. Infants who are fed infant formula will still be getting some iron from the formula, but there's absolutely no need to change to infant formula if you're breastfeeding. Carry on as you are. Solid foods should also be included to support motor development, and this includes babies' ability to chew and swallow, and also their ability to do things like hold and grasp items. Some signs that a baby might be ready to start solids include things like being able to hold their head unsupported with good control, reaching for food with their hands, showing excitement when they see food, watching other people eat, opening their mouth to accept food, and showing less of that tongue thrusting motion. Babies don't need to have teeth to start solids and will be able to manage most textures with a couple or no teeth. You can start off by offering bub 1 or 2 teaspoons of food per day, and this can be increased to include offering food 3 times a day after a milk feed. The child should always lead the way in how much and how often they eat, and you should never force food. It's often best to offer solids when a baby is most alert, which for most bubs is going to be after they've had a sleep. The best types of foods to start with are those iron-rich foods. So, for example, we want fortified iron cereals mixed with breast milk or formula, pureed meats, scrambled eggs, pureed tofu, beans, lentils, dal, or even pureed green vegetables. The only drinks that the baby should be having at this point in time are breast milk, infant formula, or water. So now we've reached that sort of 6 to 7 month stage. So at this point in time, most babies will be able to sit for short periods of time with a little bit of support. They'll start to be able to do chewing movements. They'll be able to move food from the side of their mouth to the middle of their mouth with their tongue. They'll be able to hold and grip with their hands, so things like holding a bottle or holding finger foods. So these are the types of skills that they're starting to develop that'll help them eat a variety of foods and textures and prepare them for proper self-feeding later on. The kind of foods they should be having at this point should be lumpy or mashed, or of course, if you're following that more baby-led weaning approach, a range of different finger foods. This is going to allow bub to learn about the different textures and start to develop those feeding skills. Their iron requirements are still quite high at this age, so those iron-rich foods should be included on the menu daily. Some good examples are things like mashed potato or pumpkin made with breast milk, formula, or maybe a little bit of cow's milk. Slow-cooked soft meats or minced meats, flaked fish, of course, check for the bones. Things like smooth nut butter mixed with either water, breast milk, or formula. Some soft fruits such as ripe pear, mango, avocado, banana, or cooked apple. Wet rice dishes or risottos, dals, mashed kidney, butter or lima beans. Again, you can mix in some breast milk, formula, or a little bit of cow's milk to get to the right kind of texture. And you could also use things like mashed, soft-cooked peas or broccoli. Some examples of foods you might like to try for kiddies that are following a more baby-led weaning approach or onto finger foods already are things like well-cooked broccoli or cauliflower florets. You could use pasta shapes that a baby could hold, so things like large penne or spirals, strips of omelette, pieces of fruit cut up into strips, so like watermelon or pear. But really, the number of meals that baby is getting at this point in time will slowly start to increase. So you may get up to 3 meals a day at this point. Let the child guide you though, and keep in regular contact with the family. This will help the kiddie recognise when they're hungry and when it's time for a meal. And offering milk feeds before the solids and before baby is too hungry is also important, as this will continue to be their main source of nutrition. Again, the best drinks at this age are still going to be the breast milk, infant formula, or water. And this is a great time to start to introduce things like sippy cups, straws, or even an open cup. Do not give children at this age any juice, cordial, soft drinks, or flavoured milk. These can contribute to tooth decay and also fill Bub's stomach up without actually providing very much nutrition.
So, once we have moved past that slightly lumpier texture, what should we be aiming for at the 7 to 8 month old mark?
At that 7 to 8 month mark, baby will be able to move foods from the middle to the side of their mouth and back again with their tongue, and they're going to have much more coordinated jaw and tongue movements, and this is going to allow them to eat much more complex foods. So at this point, we should be moving away from the pureed and mashed foods and introducing a much wider range of finger foods. Finger foods are those ones that baby can hold and eat by themselves. That's going to help them develop their hand-eye coordination, their fine motor skills, and self-feeding abilities. It also allows them to get into exploring a lot of different textures and shapes and flavours. Some examples of things you might want to give at this point in time are things like orange or mandarin segments chopped in half, berries chopped up. You might give them the meat off of a chicken drumstick. You might give them a rusk. You might give them pieces of baked or roasted potato or sweet potato that they can hold. You might give them some crackers with things like avocado on there, or you might give them slices of omelette, for example. It's good at this point to be offering these foods breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and also morning and afternoon tea. But be attentive of the kiddie and what they're sort of telling you. When they've had enough, that's it, that's fine. Don't worry if they don't eat that much at first. They're still learning and experimenting, so that's what's the most important thing at this point in time. And as they're sitting longer for meals, it's important to make sure the child is seated correctly for feeding. So they need to be sitting upright in a high chair or a booster seat that's stable and secure. They need to have their feet supported by a footrest, and this often gets missed. And they need to have their elbows level with the table or the tray, so they'll be in a comfortable position to reach out for food. Again, the best drinks at this age are still going to be either breast milk, formula, or water, so continue to offer those. If a child in your care at this point in time is not managing a range of different textures or is not interested in solids at all by the age of 8 months, this is really a bit of a red flag, and it's time to speak to the families about getting some advice from a health professional. This could indicate that baby has some feeding difficulties or delays that need to be addressed. It's important to note here that babies that are born prematurely may need to start solids at a different age. Now, this will be based on their developmental stage and their nutritional status, particularly their iron levels, rather than their actual age. A discussion with the family around their child's needs is important to ensure that this process begins at the right time, and they may require some help from a health professional to determine when that is. One of the things you can use to help you at this point in time is you can use the Find a Health Professional tool on the Toolbox website. This will help you with the families navigate to the nearest health professional to support them.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And the way that I guess like to explain why supportive seating is so important for babies when they're learning to eat is if you ever go into like a restaurant where they have a bar seat and you notice that all the adults there, if they don't have their feet on a footrest, they are often putting their feet up against the wall because they're seeking stability. And that's the exact same way that babies feel when they don't have any footrest. When their legs are kind of dangling there, they often slide down and are resting against the pommel of the high chair. And I guess that's a bit of a sign that, hey, I need a little bit more support. I'm feeling a little bit wobbly. So I guess the most important thing, one of the most important things to look out for in a high chair is making sure that it has a footrest built in. Or if you don't have one that has a footrest built in, make one from a big box or a little, I guess, step stool that you would have in your home.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Okay, so what about the next stage? So we're moving along now from those lumpier textures. The foods are starting to look a little bit more like what adults would be eating. What comes next?
So now we've reached that sort of 8 to 10 month mark, and babies should be doing a much better job of feeding themselves with their hands, moving the food around their mouth with their tongue. If they've been drinking from an open cup, they're probably doing a pretty good job of doing this with minimal issue. They're definitely chewing better. They're probably trying to pick up some of those smaller pieces of food. Their pincer grips kind of starting to form here, so they'll be able to pick up little things. And again, this helps them eat a much wider range of foods and textures. So at this point in time, we're really starting to introduce those chewy and harder foods and those smaller finger foods. We want them to really practice picking up those small things. So now we can be introducing things like meat and bread, dried fruit, things that are going to require a bit more effort and time to break down in baby's mouth. Smaller finger foods, so make sure you're cutting things up into smaller pieces, so things like quartered cherry tomatoes or grapes that they can pick up, but they're not a choking hazard. This is going to help baby develop up their jaw strength, their chewing ability, and work on those fine motor skills. So some other good examples that you might be able to use based on what's on your menu, giving bubs stir-fried pieces of meat, slices of any kind of meat really, crumbed fish, slices of sort of things like lasagna, dried fruit, fingers of toast with spread on it. You might want to, as I mentioned before, give them those smaller finger foods. So peas and corn are a good one, cubes of cheese or sticks or grated cheese, really smaller pasta shapes that are cooked, rice cakes, crackers, those sorts of things where they're going to have to really concentrate on what they're doing. Again, you should be offering at all the meal times now. And again, letting those children let you know when they've had enough and not worrying too much if they're not eating huge amounts. They are still learning, and it's really just about setting the scene and making meal times fun and positive experience. We do want to do one thing here, though. We want to shift from offering breast and formula first to offering solids first and using the breast milk and infant formula to top them up if they need it afterwards.
Okay, so that's a lot for babies to learn in a short period of time, and it's great to hear you talk about how important it is to keep it really light and fun, because I guess, babies are still learning, and, from my experience, a happy baby is a baby that eats better and has a better appetite, so that's a really good point. So what about, I guess, that 10-month mark? So we're kind of on the home run of introducing solids now. So what should we be doing at that 10 to 12-month mark?
Yeah, that's right. This really is the last sort of section of what's traditionally that introducing solids phase. And we're hoping that by the point that they get to their first birthday, they're now moving into eating those family foods, and you're not having to make specific special meals just for them. They'll be able to eat pretty much anything that the family's having. They should be at this point from a developmental stage, getting really good at feeding themselves with their hands. And hopefully you can start to introduce child-appropriate cutlery for them to use. So they should be using spoons and forks themselves. They'll be able to hold on to foods with one hand. They won't be needing both. They'll definitely be getting a lot better at chewing those more challenging foods and more efficient and faster at eating. And you should be able to see that your bub is able to eat with their mouth closed, so they'll be spilling less food from their mouths while they're eating. And again, this all helps them have the ability to eat a much wider range of foods and textures. So at this point, we should be introducing babies to more family meals. And this is a good opportunity for educators to role model good eating behaviours to children, such as trying new things. This is a good time to introduce cutlery to a children's mealtime and again, role model how you should be using them. You can be offering foods at breakfast, lunch, dinner, and morning and afternoon tea. And again, we're just letting the child lead the way and let us know when they've had enough, and really just allowing them to experiment and maybe even play with food sometimes, just to get them interested in some of these newer textures and foods. Again, the best drinks at this age are still going to be breast milk, formula, or water, and you should continue offering breast milk and formula as the main drink until 12 months and provide water in, again, either a sippy, straw, or open cup through the day.
Okay, and so we've made it to the 12-month mark. What should we be giving babies when they reach their 1-year-old birthday?
By 12 months, babies should be able to eat most family foods. And eating with children is an excellent opportunity for educators to role model those good eating behaviours. At this age as well, children can transition to having cow's milk as a main drink if they're eating well. However, before 12 months, cow's milk should not replace breast milk or formula as the main drink. The parents may also choose to continue to breastfeed beyond 12 months and provide you with express milk to give the child, or they may be happy to transition to using cow's milk.
So we've made it to 12 months and we are now able to offer our baby foods that adults or older children would be eating, which is great. When do we start to hit a few bumps in the road in terms of fussiness, or food refusal?
So usually when kiddies are getting to that toddler stage, so you're talking sort of post 16 months, they start to show some independence. They might refuse food or become a bit picky about what they're going to eat. And this is completely normal, totally common. Pretty much every child is going to do this. It's really about them developing their sense of self and autonomy at this age. Now, there are some things that might happen outside of that cause toddlers to refuse food sometimes. And it's important to kind of have a bit of a mental checklist of these if you're finding that one of the children in your care is being a bit fussy and not wanting to take some food. They could have just filled up on lots of things through the day already. So thinking about what time of day it is and how many other food eating opportunities they've had. They could have filled up on drinks. If they have access to things like, or being offered milk or juice, for example, they might have filled up on those and not be therefore feeling particularly hungry for solids. They might just be really tired or not hungry, not needing anything. And they might not have been particularly active that day as well and burnt off much energy. So again, that might affect their appetite. They might not be feeling too well. So it's important to kind of have a bit of a think if a child is refusing food, if any of those things are impacting on why they might be refusing to eat or not wanting to eat. There's some things you can try when a little one refuses foods. It's important to think about when you're offering foods to them. So we've spoken a couple of times already about offering foods when kiddies are most alert, and that applies for toddlers as well. So offering those newer foods or slightly unusual or harder foods to eat at breakfast or lunchtime or in that first half of the day. It's the afternoons and in the evenings, of course, they're going to start to be a lot more tired and it just might be a bit too much for them to cope with. It's also good to avoid distractions at meal times. So keeping some of those, as particularly screen or audio-based distractions, to a minimum. Now, this is probably something that's relatively easy and very common to do in a childhood education setting, as is the next point, which is around developing and sticking to mealtime routines. So education settings are really great for that. There's usually a very almost strict sort of meal schedule, which is very easy for the child to adapt to. They know what's coming next, and that can be really helpful. It stops that grazing, but it also lets the kiddies kind of tap into some of their hunger cues. And of course, just making sure that the main drink that's being offered here, so they're not accidentally filling up on other things, is that you're offering water to the children through the day.
Excellent. And I guess like a lot of these things are logical in terms of if we as adults aren't feeling well, then we're probably less likely to want to eat that day. If we haven't done much in the day, or if we're feeling sleepy, then we're less likely to be wanting to eat or prepare food. So I guess if we think about our kids as, little people, it makes sense why sometimes they wouldn't feel like eating a whole lot of new foods.
Now, one thing we haven't really delved into here that's important is teething. Children will begin to teeth somewhere between 3 and 12 months, and usually all 20 baby teeth are in place by 3 years old. So for the age range we're talking about here, which is under 12 months, normally by around 12 months, a bub will have their top front 4 teeth and their bottom front 2 teeth. Now, unfortunately, teething can be uncomfortable. It can impact on a child's appetite and willingness to eat. So it's important to consider what kind of texture foods a child is being presented with during that time. Some may prefer those softer foods. Others may be looking for something to kind of chew on, like a crust of bread or chilled fruits or veggies. As we mentioned earlier, the lack of teeth does not mean a child can't start eating solids or eat chewy or hard foods. So babies' gums are super tough, and delaying solids can have negative impacts on a baby's oral motor skill development. So not a good reason to not introduce solids. Now, if you're interested in finding out more about the introduction to solids and the developmental stages involved in that first year of life, check out our free online resource called The Lumpy Road to Solids. This resource provides more information on those important stages of development and can be found in both a digital and printable format for easy sharing with your peers and with the families at your centre.
That brings us to the end of this episode. We hope that you found this discussion useful, and we really encourage you to check out our other episodes on topics like fussy eating or allergies and intolerances. Visit the Grow and Go Toolbox to find the resources discussed today, as well as many other resources on feeding under fives. As usual, all resources will be linked in the show notes.
Check us out on social media, on Instagram and Facebook for regular tips on feeding the under fives. We would like to acknowledge the Commonwealth Department of Health and Aged Care for funding the Toolbox and the University of Queensland for supporting this project.
Thanks.